What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're looking at Psalm 136, 137, and 138 here in our Old Testament. Then we're looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 9 in the New Testament. So first off, Psalm 136 has a line that's repeated over and over again. And it's this: for his steadfast love endures forever. Talking about God's faithful covenant-keeping love that he has to his people that he shows here throughout the Old Testament. You see how he loves and cares for his people. And that's what this psalm is all about. It's reminding us, wow, look at how God showed his love in the past. And when you read it, it's like goes every other, like it says a line, then it says, for his steadfast love endures forever. And the reason it does that is it's trying to show you that the actions of God throughout history cannot be separated from God's love. It's putting those things together. Why did God do that? Why did God destroy those enemies? Why did God lead the people in? Because his steadfast love, right? That's what it was. And his steadfast love doesn't just endure for those times. Remember, the line that's repeated, his steadfast love endures forever, which is why the end of the chapter, after chronicles all the things that God has done, it says, you know what? God will continue to show his steadfast love for us. He says he gives flesh all the things they need. He rescues us from our foes. He remembered our low estate. Give thanks to the Lord, the God of heaven, for his steadfast love endures forever. So one thing that you should think through as you try to worship through these Psalms is, what has God done? Let me think about what God has done, and then let me connect that and see, okay, God did that because he was showing his love throughout history. God did things for me because he was showing his steadfast love. That's an important thing to make that connection, because sometimes we just look at the works of God and we say, wow, those are really cool works, but we don't connect them to the character of God. We need to see that those two, we can't really separate those two. When God does things, it shows who he is. So anyway, all right, Psalm 137 is a interesting psalm. You might think, okay, historically, where do we put this? Pretty easy to tell. It says they're in the land of Babylon, by the waters of Babylon, the rivers. He says, we sat down and wept when we remembered Mount Zion. We thought about Jerusalem. So clearly this was written while they were in captivity. So during the exile, they're thinking about this. They're in Babylon and they're remembering their old homeland, and the people of Babylon come and mock them. And they say, sing us a song from Jerusalem, one of those impressive songs from your impressive city that got destroyed by us, right? So it's a mocking tone that approaches this question. Sing us a song of Jerusalem. And they say, if we ever forget Jerusalem, if we ever forget the city that God had, we should forget how to play this instrument. We should forget our skill on the harp and the lyre and all this stuff. Our tongues should stick to the roof of our mouths if we forget. Then he has a turn, which is interesting. The psalm says, if we forget what God has done and we forget Jerusalem, but God, we know that you don't forget. You didn't forget what happened. So God, remember and bring on these Babylonians the judgment that's deserved for them. They destroyed God's perfect city. They destroyed Jerusalem here. God, remember their sin and pay them back. That's what this psalm is about. Interesting here, because again, he says it ends kind of abruptly with a scary line like, God, destroy these evildoers, destroy the ones that are fighting against Jerusalem. That's a helpful thing to think through. God is going to judge the people that harmed God's special people. Even if God used them for judgment, those people are not going to get away with it and get away with all their evil and stuff. So Psalm 138, again, is talking about David. Interesting, going back to David for the next 10 Psalms, I think, are all written. It says they're written of David. And this says, I want to sing to God with my whole heart when I remember how God is the God above all gods. And it says he's the king above all kings, and that all kings will come and serve God one day. And the reminder is, I think verse 6 gives us the helpful teaching principle. It says, for though the Lord is high above, he regards the lowly. Again, high and low. It's showing the difference. God is up here, right? But he cares about the people that are down here. Not just, the people on earth. He cares specifically for the humble people. It says, but the haughty, the people who think that they're up here, which again, when you see the word haughty in the book of Psalms and Proverbs, you see it a lot in the Old Testament. That's the word which means prideful. The people who look down on other people. They pretend like they're up here and they're looking down on others. And it says, the haughty, God knows them from afar. God's not close to them. God does not keep a special relationship with the people that are proud and look down on other people, which is a really strong reminder. You and I, we need to make sure we never look down on people. We don't have a haughty look, which is one of the things that it says the Lord actually hates. He hates a haughty look. And we never want to be people who do that. So be careful today against your heart wanting to be proud and wanting to look down on others. Be careful that you don't do that. So, all right, that was Psalm 137. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians 9 continues the thought that Paul was talking about yesterday, which said these meats and food sacrificed to idols. I want to make sure that my knowledge of what's going on doesn't make me put something on my brother that's unloving. And the thought is his knowledge was showing him, hey, these idols, they're not even real idols. So it doesn't matter. I don't care about eating or not eating these meat, but I want to make sure that I don't take my freedoms as a Christian and transfer them over to these other Christians and say, you have to be like me. And here's what he goes on to say. He says, look, I am an apostle, and as an apostle, I have certain rights. Paul says this about himself. He says, I have certain rights, but I don't make use of all my rights. In fact, when he went to Corinth, there were certain things he did not take possession of. For example, as an apostle, he of all people should have been supported and financially even paid for preaching. And that sounds kind of weird, but basically there should have been people that had Paul stay in his house, and that happens sometimes. But here in Corinth, Paul says, look, I actually worked in the marketplace because I didn't want anyone to think that I was just, taking things from people. I didn't want people to think I was a freeloader. So he says, look, because I wanted to make sure you didn't feel that, I, out of love, took my liberty and said, I'm not going to exercise my liberty. Now, think about yesterday. He's trying to tell them, learn from my example here. Learn that I said, I choose to love you guys, you Corinthians, enough to say, you guys don't need to house me, support me, and you don't even need to give at the beginning. Just, I want you to come hear the gospel. He said, I did that out of love. Now he says, you Corinthian Christians, you need to do that to other people. You need to follow that example and say, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice my freedoms in Christ. I'm willing to even sacrifice some of the benefits that I can have just as a Christian to say, I'm going to serve other people and love them. And the big takeaway here is he says, I came to preach the gospel. And because I came to preach the gospel, that was my main focus. And anything that got in the way of completing that mission, I was going to say, I'm not going to make use of. And again, this is kind of hard sometimes as we think through, well, what things should I not take part in out of love for other people? It's different for different situations. So don't look at this and say, great, meat sacrifice to idols, I'll never have to worry about that, so I don't have to do this. Paul actually is showing that it's not just that one issue where Christians need to love one another and put their preferences aside to help other people. It could be any issue. That we're not talking about a sin issue or anything. It could be any issue like this. He says, these pastors, they deserve to be paid. He says, the law even says, don't muzzle the ox while it's treading the grain. These Christian pastors who came in, they deserved to be housed and supported for the ministry work they were doing. Paul, he said, you don't need to house me. I'm going to pay my own way. And he said, I did that out of love for you. It says here at the end, in verse 24, he talks about self-control. He says, I exercise great self-control with you because I didn't want to come preach to you and then be disqualified by my actions. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just sharing the gospel, but I was also living out the gospel for you. And I think the big thing we can take away is, look at how self-sacrificing Paul was. He did not consider his own comfort. He didn't consider his own support or whatever. He was only focused on serving them. That is the right mindset as we seek to serve other people. Not concerned so much about what we're going to get out of it, if we're going to get paid back, if it's going to be worth it for us. Because when we think about serving, we're not thinking about us. We need to think about how will this help and serve other people. And if I'm able to do it, I'm willing to do it. That's the right mindset. And we need to take that mindset to our day-to-day lives as we seek to serve other Christians in our lives. So thanks for reading with us. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.